Yes, greetings, my brothers and sisters. How you doing out there? Hope all of you are fine and keeping safe in this time. Welcome to another edition of the Chris B. Motep Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, to share our videos, and to leave your comments down below. Let us know what you think and feel about what we post up. I also want to say thank you to the subscribers. Many of you have subscribed over the last few months. I remember when we were stuck on 40 subscribers, now we're nearly 100. And a lot of people are actually viewing our videos, so we give thanks for that. I'm here to talk about Bunny Lee, the continuation of Bunny Lee, because I posted something up about him when he passed away, so sad, back in October. And many of you have watched the video what I've posted up, and many of you have commented and you've told me about what you think and feel about what I said, and many of you wanted me to speak some more about Bunny Lee, to go on some more my own experiences about Bunny Lee and so on, and what I think and feel of him myself from a personal perspective and on a personal level. And I'm here now today to speak to you about some of those things. You can't talk about Bunny Lee in a mere with the little time I've got here, with maybe 10 minutes. It will take us years and years and years to speak about Bunny Lee, because he's so vast, and he's a man who's been in the industry since the 50s as a teenager, as a record plugger for Duke Reid and for Coxsone Dodd and for other various local producers in Kingston at that time, before he got his foot into the industry proper. So I can only give you bits and pieces about the man. I've met him about 3 times, met him twice at Body Music. And I remember one evening, this was about 8 years ago, so it'd been summer, coming up to 8 years ago, summer 2013, I was coming from somewhere. And as I was about to cross over, because for those of you who know, Body Music was situated at the corner of West Green Road, and then eventually they had to move inside because of Costas. So where Costas is now, that's where Body Music used to be, but they've had to move a few doors in, but now they've closed down all entirely. And I was coming from somewhere, and I was crossing over to the other side of the road on West Green Road, because it was situated in the corner of West Green Road, now it's Tottenham High Road. And as I was about to cross over, it was a bit dark, and as I was about to cross over, I saw Bunny Lee crossing over from where I was going to. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Lee," and he says, "Hi!" He was so excited that somebody actually recognized him. It was quite, as I said, it was quite dark, but I could never not see Bunny Lee, because studied about him and the music for so many years. We've got some of his albums that he's produced. Know what he looks like. Even if my eyes were closed, I would know it's Bunny Lee. I could recognize Bunny Lee, even if my eyes were closed like that. And so yes, but I remember many years ago, my father had experiences, because my father used to go to Rita and Benny's. They were a record shop based in Stamford Hill, and people like Bunny Lee used to go there to gauge how well their records were selling. And Bunny Lee used to go to Rita and Benny's quite a lot, because he's friends with them, and they used to talk his records, but not only just his records, but Coxsone Dodd's records, Duke Reid's records, Lee Perry's records, and most of the Jamaican producers at that time were in business of Rita and Bunny down in Stamford. They're not there; they left many years ago, and so my father knew him. And he also knew Count Sheddy, who was also a very good friend of Bunny Lee's as well. Count Sheddy also had a record shop in Stoke Newington. Also, Dennis Brown had a record shop in that area as well. And Bunny Lee would go there very often. Of course, Dennis Brown used to work for Bunny Lee as one of his recording artists in the 70s and in the 80s as well. And so you could never miss that. You could never miss, he was always around, and you can never miss him. He was always around and plugging his records and going to these shops and these record shops to see how well his productions were selling, and also to go there to hang out with his friends and to, just to see who's, just to gauge how the music was doing at that time. But I remember many years ago when I was on SLR radio, this is about 14 years ago, one of my friends on a radio station called Douglas Williams, he sadly passed away last year. He was interviewing Bunny Lee, and he asked me to come on the show with Bunny Lee, and I said to him, no, because Bunny Lee is a walking encyclopedia. I think I mentioned this on my previous, on a video I did for him, the tribute video I did for him back in October. Bunny Lee can go solo any day of the week. He's the best speaker of reggae music I've ever heard, and other Jamaican music I've ever heard. He's a walking encyclopedia. He's the best I've ever heard. He knows every single thing there is to know, virtually. Because I said, he's been in it since virtually the start of the recording industry, which took place in the 1950s in Jamaica. and he was around. He knew the artists, he knew the producers. He went to the dances, the sound system dances in Foresters Hall, in Love Lane, Luke Lane, those prestigious venues in and around Kingston. But they also had sound system dances outside of Kingston as well, in places down in Manchester, the Grill, Montego Bay, Spanish Town, and various other parishes that, you know, sound system dances were kept. But of course, Kingston was the main one because it was the capital, it's the biggest area, and that's where most of the musicians and the artists congregated and were dwelling and living at that time. And so Bunny Lee was always very, very good on sound system. He knew what songs were being played, and that's one of the things that got him inspired to become, you know, a record producer as well as being a record plugger in the early days. That's where he started from as a record plugger for, as I mentioned before many times, Duke Reid and Coxsone Dodd and so on. And I think for King Edwards as well, the Giant, he was also a record producer at that time, but his productions were mostly done in the ska era. You know, he was only in productions for maybe 4 or 5 years. And by the time Rocksteady came on the scene in 1966, 1967, he had gone from the industry because he said that he never used to like when the artists used to congregate in the studio and smoke a lot of herbs and so on. So he said every time he went into the studio to record a song, he couldn't breathe because all this smoke coming from inside with virtually all the artists smoking weed and so on, and he didn't smoke, so it was difficult for him. But he was also a very great sound system operator, King Edwards. They used to call him the Giant because he's one of the pioneering sound system operators in the 1940s, 1950s, and in the 1960s. Mind you, in the 1960s, a lot of the sound system dances were kind of like becoming less and less because there was a rude boy culture in Jamaica, and I'll talk about this another time, which was taking place and was dominating proceedings and the dance halls at that time. And so as a result, many of the sound system operators like Duke Reid, Coxsone, King Edwards, Tom Vergate Sebastian, and so on. Mind you, Tom Vergate Sebastian died in the 1950s because he actually committed suicide. But certainly Duke Reid, Coxsone Dodd, Meritone, and 1 or 2 others, as I mentioned, were not were not participating in sound system dances as much in the 60s because of the rude boy culture. But Bunny was in and around all of that. He was in amongst it. He absorbed it and he loved it. And when you listen to his interviews on YouTube or on DVD and video, you can see the excitement in his face, and you can hear the excitement in his voice when he talks about the sound system days of the 50s, and so on. But he was a great man, Bunny Lee. He was actually the one who actually was responsible for burying Slim Smith as well, because for those of you who know, Slim Smith was one of the greatest voices ever to come from Jamaica. One of the greatest voices ever to come from Jamaica. Many people's favourite artists. And he recorded a lot for Bunny Lee. He recorded extensively for Bunny Lee in both the 60s and the 70s. And I believe the last song he did before he drew his last breath was for Bunny Lee. The time has come. That was for Bunny Lee. And it was actually Bunny Lee who actually paid for his burial. And Bunny Lee was behind also the burial. For Slim Smith, for those of you who know, he was really compared to like Curtis Mayfield. They referred him as a Curtis Mayfield of Jamaica, that high-pitched falsetto voice. But Bunny Lee talks about Slim Smith's voice. He says that Slim Smith sung from the heart, but he goes into much more detail about Slim Smith's singing voice and how he sung with that great emotion in that falsetto, because he worked with him for many years, produced many of his great songs and so on. He was his friend as well. And as I mentioned before, he paid for his burial when he untimely passed away in 1973 after trying to break into his parents' house, and he bled to death as a result. We'll talk about these things another time, and we're going to separate them and break them up a bit and so on. But yes, but as I was saying, but he also paid for, I believe, I don't know if this is true or not, but from what I heard and what I gather, he also paid for Daryl Wilson's burial as well in 1995. Daryl Wilson passed away untimely in 1995. He was only 46 when he passed away. And I believe that Bunny Lee was the one that paid for, his funeral, or was partly behind the finances for his funeral. But he had a big send of Daryl Wilson. I'm hearing that it's one of the biggest funerals ever in Jamaican history. The only funeral they say was bigger was Bob Marley's funeral back in 1981. But that was because Daryl Wilson was Jamaica's first child star in the early 1960s, and he spent 5 years. He spent he spent 7 years with Coxsone between 61 and 68. He signed as a 12-year-old in 1961. And Bunny was the one who was behind the funeral of him as well. So he's done many great things in the industry. He's produced many of the great artists. He's produced the Wailers, Dennis Brown, John Holt, Oris Andy, Slim Smith, Pat Kelly, Darrell Wilson, many of the DJs, Dennis Al Capone, Uroy, Iroy, Delinja, Trinity, so many people, so many of the illustrious voices of Jamaican music has recorded for Bunny Striker Lee. I mean, we can't sit here, as I said at the top of the piece, that we can't sit here and speak about Bunny Lee in 10 or 15 minutes. We need years and years, because this is a man who's been in the industry for over 60 years until he passed away so sadly a few months ago. So we say we'll come again down the line and speak some more about Bunny Lee another time, and other producers and other icons and stalwarts within the industry. As I promised you that that's what this channel is about. I know that recently we've been talking about, the death of some of our legends, but this is about educating the ones about Jamaican music, and as well as about our historical past as well, not just Jamaican music, but soul, jazz. We're going to go into chematology. We do the whole 9 yards, and eventually we're going to try and grow the channel, and we're going to try and do some live streams as well. We're going to try and get people up on here. We're going to do interviews with people, and we're going to post it up for you to enjoy. So once again, don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and leave your comments down below. Crispy Imhotep, spread the word. And we'll say, Bunny Lee, we say thank you so much for your 60 odd years in the industry, and thank you for those wonderful, great musics that you produced. And I forgot to mention Johnny Clark, one of my favorite singers, who actually also recorded for Bunny Lee extensively in the 1970s. Those great hits like Move Out of Babylon and Play Fool to Get Wise and Blood Donza, and so many hits. So thank you so much. Peace and love. Guidance.